Hello and welcome to this lecture, and in this lecture we are going to learn something about list comprehensions. So the name actually sounds quite confusing, like what is that? But the thing is that list comprehension is nothing but it's a way to create a list by defining certain set of rules in a list. Now in the previous few lectures we have created some simple list. So to create a list we had the list name, and we actually manually put out the contents of the list like 1 to 3 or the name of certain fruits. Now what if you actually need to have a list which follows a certain rule? So let's say you want a list which contains square of numbers from 0 to 4. So what you could do is that you could essentially go ahead, create a list and put in manually the contents by calculating the square of each and every number. But what list comprehension allows you to do is to define a rule which is automatically going to create your list. So let's take an example where we have to create a list of numbers or the list of squares of numbers from 0 to 4. So in this case, what you simply need to do is that first you need to name the list. So let's name this list as list itself. So we type list equals, and as usual we have the square brackets. Now in the square brackets we need to specify a rule. So in this case, as we want to print out the square of numbers from 0 to 4, let's take a variable x and let's actually find out the square of this number. So in order to calculate square, we have x multiplied by that is nothing but raised to the power 2. So once we have raised this thing to the power of 2, we actually need to iterate x from 0 to 4, and we could do that by using for loop. So right after this, simply type in for x in range, and here as we want numbers from 0 to 4, you could specify the range as 5. So this thing right here which is written inside square brackets that is in the list is nothing but it is a rule which is going to define what is actually going to be present in the list itself. So from the rule you could easily make out that first of all it is going to have squares of numbers, and from the range you could make out that these squares will be ranging from 0 to 4. So if you want to verify if this rule is correct and if your list is correctly populated, you could simply print out the list by passing the list to the print function. So if you simply save the code and if you run this, as you could see, you will get the result as the list which contains square of numbers from 0 to 4. So 0 square is 0, 1 square is 1, 2 square is 4, 3 square is 9, and 4 square is 16. Now you could also modify this thing to have a different range, and if you save the code, as you run this code, as you could see, now you get a different set of lists because you have modified the rule a little bit. Now one more interesting thing about this rule is that you could also include if statements inside this rule. So for example, let's say you need to define a list which is similar to this, but let's assume that you only want even numbers present in your list. So for doing that, we could also filter out the result by using the if statement. So you simply need to type if, and as you want even numbers in this case, you actually need to divide the number by 2 and check out the remainder. So for that, what we do is that we want to check if x raised to the power 2 actually has a remainder 0 when divided by 2. So we simply type this mod of 2. So this should be equal to 0. So when this condition is satisfied, that is nothing but if we calculate the square of a number, and if that square of a number is even, only then we want to add that element in our list. So if we save the code now and if we try to run this, as you could see, now we have square of numbers ranging from 0 to 9, but the only thing is that only the squares which are even are included in this list right here. So this is nothing but list comprehension, and you could actually go ahead and create any kind of list by defining a particular set of rule for your list. So this rule right here is actually used to define the square of numbers in a list which are actually even. So you could go ahead and you could create your very own rules to define the elements in your list, and this proves out to be handy if you wanted to make like a very huge list of numbers. So list comprehension actually saves our time and creates a list by itself. So that's it for this lecture, and I hope you guys understood what are list comprehensions. And if you have any doubts or difficulties in this lecture or any of the lecture, then please kindly feel free to post in the Q&A section or directly message me. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you.